who doesn't want to work on something that's something they created. I mean, not everybody wants to do that. I just assume everyone does because I do.
Recorded at the Kitchen Studios. This is the Pencil Pushers Podcast.
Welcome, Leadheads. You are listening to yet another banger episode of the Pencil Pushers Podcast, and I'm your humble host, Mike Rosado. Today, we present my chat with super talented extraordinaire Jessica Borustki. She's currently director for The Loud House, the hit sitcom-style animated show currently on Nickelodeon. We walk through her already rich career of working with such classics like Ren and Stimpy, Looney Tunes, Thundercats, and more. What it takes to be a director in animation. Her goal is to develop her own original work, which may or may not be revealed here, and so much more. Jessica was so fun to chat with, and I think you'll have just as much fun listening in. So do yourself a favor, ease your seat back, relax, grab yourself snacks, a coffee, some tea, or whatever your beverage of choice may be, and enjoy our chat with Jessica. All right, we're here with Borutski, right? Am I getting the name correct?
Yeah, you got it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Jessica is a multi-talented figure in animation. She is very, very versatile. She's had a pretty strong, long career here at this point. You've been a writer, storyboard artist, character designer, animator, producer, and now currently you're a director for The Loud House, correct?
Yeah, I'm supervising director on Loud House. I started mid-season 4 and now we're going into season 6, so I've been on the show for like over 2 years now, which is crazy. Okay. It went by really quick.
It's amazing. And did that start out as you being a director there, or did you have a different position at that time?
I had never worked at Nickelodeon prior to this job, so prior to that I was at Warner Brothers, and I got the gig at Nick. My friend Kyle Marshall, who's also Canadian, he's now executive producer on Loud House. He asked me if I was interested in jumping over to Nick, because I had been at Warner Brothers for almost a decade by that point. So I was like, yes, definitely. I've been in LA now for a decade almost, and I've only worked in one studio. I think I need to experience another studio, like lifestyle or culture and or vibe altogether. Yeah. So that's why I took the new gig. And I just was sort of, I'd been at Warner Brothers for so long. I already did 2 Looney Tune reboots.
Yeah, that's right.
Worked on a lot of their, their library of all of their characters. And a lot of the work at Warner Brothers is remakes. And I was sort of not interested in remaking another show. There's a slight chance I was going to be on Animaniacs, but I just wanted to do something different, which is why I left. Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha. So it must have been pretty exciting to get in with Nickelodeon, because it not only just a crazy storied history at this point, probably 30 plus years at this point now of providing really awesome, innovative, creative programs.
Yeah.
And so what was that like? Was it a no-brainer for you, shifting gears and climbing on board with them?
Yeah. I love the brand Nickelodeon. I grew up with Nickelodeon, and I like cartoony shows, and Loud House, although it is very sitcom-y, it has a nice comic book sort of 1950s, 60s styling to it, which I really am attracted to. And it has that classic comic book sort of style framing and the way the camera plays a role in the show. It's very much like comics, or like more like classic cartoons. The camera isn't zooming around and doing crazy things. It's more about character acting and the interactions, which I love. So I was really attracted to the show for that. And I also pitch a lot of my own stuff. I thought Nickelodeon would be a good home for some of my own ideas. So I pitched also a couple things there, and I'm actually now started development on one of the ideas I pitched like a year ago. We're finally like starting to develop the idea. So,
we're talking breaking news here. Is this breaking news on the Pencil Pushers podcast?
I guess it is. I mean, I haven't posted an actual like announcement of it I can't. I don't know.
Because you were waiting for this episode. You were waiting for this episode to be released
for you
first.
To call me. Yeah. I can't say anything about the project, but I can say that I did pitch an idea, and it did get picked up in early development stage. So it's called Spark at Nickelodeon, and they spend a bit of time with an artist to slowly develop an idea. So I've been working on that with him, which has been really fun, which was the goal. I wanted to go there and learn, a bit more about directing a show. Because it's funny, I had directed prior to going on to Loud House on the Looney Tunes show and a bit on Bunnicula, but it was different in the way that it was my show with Bunnicula. And I sort of came up with the idea.
That one was your show? That was your show?
Yeah, I was the
okay.
I was the showrunner on that. I mean, I didn't create Bunnicula, but I definitely reimagined Bunnicula for television. Bunnicula was a novel written by James Howe in 1979. And we reimagined it at Warner Brothers. They had the rights to Bunnicula since the 80s, and they were trying to figure out what to do with it. And Sam Register was just like, hey, you like creepy cute. Why don't you try drawing Bunnicula? Like, what would he look like to you? And I was like, oh, that sounds really fun. And I went home and I sketched a bunch of stuff that night, came back the next day, and then we started the series and the development. And that was that. So I feel like Amazing. I had experience in directing and sort of running a show, but I feel like it's a different job when you're going into a show that's not yours and you have to learn sort of the mechanics of the directing. I learned so much coming onto Loud House, just like how to cut. It was just all different. It was just a different. Maybe it's like this for any show that you go onto, but I just really noticed it coming on to Loud House that like I kind of thought I knew my stuff, and then I went in and being like, oh wait, there's so much more that I need to learn.
Wow.
And I think just going on to different shows and different styles. Actually, I take that back because I directed an episode of Thundercats, and I was like, "What's happening?"
Why? Tell me.
It was the new Thundercats.
Thundercats Roar, right?
And I was finishing up Bunnicula, and they were like, "Hey, we need help directing this episode. Can you help us?" So I was like, "Okay." So I hopped on. I think it was 2 episodes, and I remember just like watching it, and I was just so used to my Bunnicula, just the formula of the show and the style and the humor. And then I was like I was given like a storyboard and Victor Courtwright's read of an entire script. He's the creator of Thundercats Roar, the showrunner.
Okay.
And I was supposed to edit this all together and time it, and I was just like, it was just so hard, and I hated it. It was so uncomfortable. I felt like I shouldn't be a director. I don't know what I'm doing, because it was just a whole new style, So you have to like, as a director, I realized like you really have to give yourself patience to acclimate to other shows, that aren't yours.
Sure. Yeah.
Just a lot.
What are? Oh, who do we got there?
It's my dog. My son, he just came home. I can hear him in the other room. I'm just going to make sure the door's locked. This is Griff.
Yeah. What's up,
He's
Griff?
my coworker for these times.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he's great. He's just noisy sometimes. But
That's
anyway.
the best. This is absolutely the best reason for staying at home right now.
The pets.
Hanging out with the dogs.
Yeah, the dogs are in heaven. This is like the time of their lives.
Yeah, they're going to go through some major trauma when people start going back into the office.
Oh, yeah. They're going to be sad.
Speaking of that, I mean, what is it like directing a TV show when you're not able to collaborate like you used to? I mean, it's got to be kind of a challenge, isn't it? Especially when you're working with so many on a team, right?
Yeah. It is. I feel like we were lucky, though, in the way that Loud House, going into season 5, when we went into the pandemic, we were like a well-oiled machine, because like we had already done our 4th season. Everybody knows the show. We all know each other really well. We did have to go through, we had like a sort of a board revision. All of our board artists kind of all took on new jobs around the same time, because they had all been on the show for about 4 years at this point. We're ready for something new. So we did have a pretty much new boarding team. But that's the only challenge, was just sort of getting to know these people I've never met and trying to connect with them over Zoom calls. And and figuring out the best way to do it. But in all honesty, like, it's worked really well for our show. It's a little bit more tedious because there's a lot more, at your desk typing notes instead of just meeting with someone in a room and having a conversation with the editor, let's say.
Sure.
And you're in the room and you're able to point at the screen and say, could you just shave off 4 frames there? Like that kind of stuff I miss because it's just so interactive.
Sure.
Rather than cut 4 frames here, you're at your desk, type. But there's something to be said about being alone and making notes. I feel like I'm a little bit more focused because I don't, like Jeff's not walking by with a coffee, peeking his head in, going like, hey guys, what are you doing? Like you're just so focused. I just made up that name, Jeff. There's actually not a Jeff that does that. But like, I think for me to be in my room, I come up with, I think, more innovative, better ideas by myself than I do in the studio. And I'm hoping that we are able to go back, and a lot of people are talking about implementing this style of work where, the crew can be in maybe Monday to Wednesday for like essential meetings. And then Thursday, Friday, we can all work at home and connect if we need to, like via Zoom. And then that way there's like a hybrid work experience, because a lot of artists are like me and are feeling like, no, I love being at home and I love having that control and that's being, in solitude for more hours a day, able to draw, able to concentrate. But it would be nice to be in and see everybody too. So
just kind of coming up with a blend workspace, work environment.
It's really cool. And a lot of people are seeing like, wow, we can really work with people we want to, even if they're not in LA. Like it's now being proven, like we can make shows and great shows.
Yeah.
Even if we're all not in the same building together every single day. I actually think that like way of working is kind of dated. Like we don't always have to be there. You don't have to see me every day to know I'm doing my job.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, so as I mentioned earlier, I before we got on the interview here, I am a creative director, owner of my own branding company, and I always feel that I don't really, although I love the collaboration and I can't wait for us to be back in a space together, I feel like you're actually more empowered when you give them the ability to not focus on like micromanaging and just being there. It's all about like what you produce at the end of the day. It doesn't matter if you go for a walk for 4 hours that day. If you're able to really come up with something that's innovative and creative and makes the audience happy, then that's what matters, really.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that, your employees get when they don't have the shackles of be there 9 to 5, like if they can do their 4-hour walk, they're probably going to produce much more creative work for you. And that's what you want in the end. You don't care if they're there in the room with you. Yeah. Exactly. I think it's awesome.
So that's cool. So, by the way, I should note that I was able to watch a few episodes of The Loud House, yours specifically. I didn't realize that you weren't on all the episodes. At least I think I saw one for season 5 that you were not the director.
Yep. So we rotate. So there's 2 directors. There's me and Pat Pakula. God, I hope I said his name right. He's awesome. So him and I are the 2 directors. Okay. When we rotate. Yeah, for a while It was just me, and then Kyle was executive producer, but it's just, I think we had the budget and it just made our jobs easier to have another director on. And
I absolutely love the show. It's so much fun to watch. It's funny, clever, and I just think the characters are really dynamic. So it's funny because I'd never actually knew about the show before we started connecting. So I'm glad that if for nothing more, even if you say this interview with Mike was trash, at least I got to know that the show, I got to be introduced to the show, which is fantastic.
Yeah, it's really well done. It's really well written, and it's just at this point, it's such a huge universe of characters, and it's so rich now because it has a history. And yeah, it's probably I think the best written show I've worked on. It's the first show I've worked on with a writer's room. I worked on shows where we had to contract writers out, and it was hard. But when you when I realized, like, if you're going to have money to spend on something, make sure like you're spending it on your writers, like at the core, like, you know, in a writing room, together, it'll make all the difference, you know. The more I work, the more I realize, like, if you don't have all of your questions or problems ironed out in your script, it's just going to be, you know, it's going to be like a little snowball, and it's going to keep rolling, and the problems are going to get bigger if it's not figured out in the script as your blueprint of that episode. So
yeah, it's kind of crazy to think that a TV show would have contractors as writers when it feels like, particularly for animation, where it's such a creative, collaborative effort, that you would need to have creative, you know, almost like a rhythm that needs to happen, right?
You do. And I think I don't think Warner Brothers does that for their live action shows, but because our budgets were small in the animation, at the time, like, I think their budgets are better now, but this was like when we were making Bunnicula, and they just couldn't afford to have a writer's room. So we just had people come in. I don't know. He's just like staring at me like he's going to give me a kiss or something.
We're talking about your dog now, just to be clear for people who can't see the video.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Should clarify that. So I think it's crazy. Like, if you have any money to spend, like, make sure, like, contract out your artists, you know?
Right.
Contract out a board artist that will come in. I think to have the writers, they're always together, they're always developing, they're just on that same wavelength. It'll just make the series that much richer. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit about life as a director for a TV show. I mean, you know, we've spoken about it a little bit here, but just a little bit more granular, because I'm super curious about what it's like in terms of, maybe a couple of things. Firstly, you obviously are a creative enough person in terms of wanting to take on the bigger vision of a concept, right? Mm-hmm. This is obviously something that you're passionate about now. Was that always the case for you, or was there a time, like perhaps when you were, you know, still at Algonquin College, where you're thinking, I just want to be an animator and that's it. That's my greatest desire. That's everything I want to do, and that's all I want to do. I don't want to do anything else. Was it that, or did you see long term that directing was something you really wanted to do? Because you're already, of the work that I've seen, your animation's fantastic. Do you ever feel like maybe I just want to be an animator still?
That's a really
lots of loaded questions.
No, it's a great question, because it's kind of evolved. But when I started off in college, I don't remember. I think I didn't care what I did as long as I was drawing in the industry. But I always liked telling stories, and I always told stories. I always made up characters. I always, you know, made comics. I had that. And as a kid, I would always like direct my dad with the camera, like, Dad, cut over here. And I'd always make everything a production. So I think that directing bug was like in my blood from a young age, in my DNA. But then, you know, when I started Algonquin, I was mostly interested in drawing and characters and design and animation. So my first 5 years of my career, I was like, if someone would ask me, like, would you want to storyboard? Well, I could storyboard, but if someone said, would you want to direct? I think I would have been not interested, because I think it would have been too much for me. Like, I wanted to focus on the visuals of the design and the animation.
Which at the end of the day, for an animation industry, that's probably the best route to start that way, right?
I am like such a textbook way of growing, because I literally, like, first job, I was animating. I think it was in betweening too, a lot of it, and then like you were in betweening. Yeah, on paper and pencil, and then I did key posing. You know, so like I slowly like got every job, artist job, like on the list. I moved up from like animator to designer to board artist to director, then showrunner producer. So yeah, I totally did that ladder. But each job that I was doing, I was fully immersed in it, and I loved what I was doing. Like, I wasn't a character designer hoping to be a showrunner. But that being said, I always had a bigger vision. I think that's why they let me all of a sudden, direct Merry Melodies from Canada at that time for Warner Brothers, because I would design these characters, but I would make notes and like ideas like, okay, he's wearing this thing and maybe it can do this in this shot and da 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 da. I don't know how it happened, but I guess the guy, Tony Cervone, the producer who hired me to redesign the Looney Tunes, who gave me my first directing credits. He selected me from, like, he found my short film on the internet. So I think he knew, like, okay, this person has directing skills. So her designs are great. Let's see what she can do. So he let me, like, clean up one of his, like, really rough thumbnail boards for the first Merry Melody I did. And then from there, I just kept proving myself. And then I just became a board artist on the Merry Melodies to director. Then when I was asked to showrun, I was very unsure that was for me, because I care more about drawing. And I thought that, this would mean that I'm just going to be, a critic basically and look at everyone else's work and make notes. And I wasn't interested in that. And that is a big part of my job. And I draw like a lot less than I ever have in that way.
Does that bother you at all?
Sometimes it does. Like some days I'm like, man, I just want to like take some boards and just be a board artist for a few years, and that could happen. I think that's a great thing to do. That being said, like I do boarding sometimes on the side. I was boarding for the new Snoopy show. I did a bunch of boards on that.
This could be a new Snoopy show?
Yeah, it's on Apple Plus right now. It just launched like a month ago.
Is it hand drawn?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I boarded on that. Wild Brain Canada's doing it. They're really nice. Like, I would definitely check them out. They're beautifully done. They did a really good job at like reviving the characters and keeping all the charm. It's really good.
Does it have that sort of like? Was it Bill Melendez style, or what was this?
Oh, I don't know.
Like the old school versions,
No, it's definitely not that style. I think it was Bill Melinda, the one where they looked very cute, like bigger heads, like very cute. Is that?
Yeah, it was the classic sort of Peanuts.
This is sort of the one that was on like greeting cards in the 80s, like the Peanuts that I know. But it's really, really well done.
Nice.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
It was a good crew to work for. But so I do stuff like that, and then I think the reason why Loud House is such a great show for me is that I'm in such a rhythm with it, and I know it, that I have all of this extra energy, creative energy, that I can develop a show on the side.
Sure, gotcha.
That's kind of like a really nice place to get if you're in the industry. You get, have a really comfy show that you love, and then on your downtime you have enough energy to put into something else. Because sometimes you're on shows, like when you're like, let's say starting a show like Benicula that's totally new and we didn't know what we were doing, we were all very young. It's so draining, and your brain is working a mile a minute. At the end of the day, like I couldn't have developed anything new at the end of the day working on that. But at the same time, I was developing a show, and that's usually the goal for me, is that I want to develop my own show, because, I mean, who doesn't want to work on something that's something they created? I mean, not everybody wants to do that. I just assume everyone does, because I do. But it's not true, because I know people that love being a color stylist or designing, and to them they're like, oh, I wouldn't want to run a show, are you kidding me? Or I wouldn't want to have my own show. But for me, the goal is to have your own show, because I guess I just really like telling stories with my own characters. And
it seems like it's kind of hard to imagine another studio that gives people the opportunity to do that more than Nickelodeon. Am I wrong? I mean, obviously we've got streaming. Streaming is a huge component there. Netflix is putting tons and tons of money into animation, and obviously things like places like Apple and HBO, obviously Disney. But it seems like Nickelodeon has this tradition that's lasted for quite some time, and it just feels like it's getting to be more and more so. Do you find that to be the case too?
I think it depends on who you ask, because I think a lot of people, like, depending on their experience with studios, can be very like if they had a development deal and it ended. I know that happens a lot. So some people are like, oh yeah, I would never work there because, my show didn't go through. And But I do feel like Nickelodeon is like, I mean, they have legends like, SpongeBob, for instance, like such a vision. So yeah, they are really good at finding and promoting an artist for sure. They're really good at lifting their artists. Because I don't think I've ever been promoted as much as I have since my time at Nick. Like they're always like, oh, can we put you on Instagram drawing with people? Like we want to hear your story and we want to interview you. And that just didn't really happen at other jobs. So I think that's kind of cool. They really like to just sort of showcase their artists. Like it feels like they're very proud of their people that work there.
Yeah. Speaking of, and I want to go back to more questions about you as a director, but one thing I wanted to talk about was I absolutely adored watching the Women of Nick animation, that little mini doc that's on YouTube that I saw.
Yeah, that's like one of the examples of them doing stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, where you really get this sense of inclusion, a family sort of environment, empowering artists to sort of reach for the best of them in terms of their creativity and maybe even potentially leadership positions, et cetera. That was the vibe that I got from the video. I'm really curious as a woman in the field of animation, it feels like we're getting a little bit more of a level playing field. I may be way off on this, but certainly it's a lot better than it was even like 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Where do you see that now? And when you're growing up, dreaming of being an animator, going to, you went to Osgood Township High, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Go Panthers. But what was it for you as a young woman, wanting to get an animation? Was that anything that you thought about much?
I never thought about it. And it's so funny because then when I was forced to look at it, when like Me Too happened even, or just, I remember being asked when I was younger, do you want to be in a women's group? And I didn't want to associate myself with women's groups because I thought, why? Like, that's like just like, why does it matter that like my gender is something? But I think, I don't know what it is. I just like had blinders to any sort of, I think it's denial maybe more. I just didn't want to see that there were issues.
Sure.
But and it's so funny because I started my career at Spumco and I walked into a room, and my boss is John Cristofalusi, who's one of the biggest, offenders in this whole Me Too movement in the animation, next to, I don't know who else, but there's been
and then you have like John Lasseter, the situations with that, of course.
And so I went into this small studio, Spumco, that didn't have HR. There was all young people in Canada, and it was led by a ringleader who everyone was like, oh, animation god. So it was almost like a cult. It really was. And he really preyed on me because I was 19 when I started there. And he really liked very young girls, and he was inappropriate. And that's how I started my career. So I had that complication happening, and I was trying to focus on just doing my work. I did it. I ended up working there for a couple of years, but after that job, holy crap, every other job I did was so easy, and so like getting anything even approved was a miracle, because at Spumco you could draw something a million times and it was never right. People call that a mad genius. I just call it mad. Like, it's not like he's not helping create a show. He's just, spending tons of money. You got to make a decision.
Right.
So
I remember seeing this one video where he was talking about where he was saying like every pose needs to be a pose that's never been seen before or something like that. Yeah. Does that make sense? Like a facial expression. If I've seen it before, I don't want to see it. It's got to be something completely new. I'm like, wow, that's got to be a lot of pressure considering there's 24 frames a second.
Yeah, and I get it, but mad is mad,
Right.
Like, but his notes were so stupid because it would be like maybe an eyebrow would be that much smaller, like lower, and then the lip would be curled up a little bit more. Awesome little details, but at the end of the day, when you got to get something done, that can't be what's holding you back when you have to deliver to a network.
Well, that's what happened with him in Nickelodeon, right? Or was it MTV?
Yeah. Or Nickelodeon, whatever was the broadcaster at that time, MTV. Yeah, that's why he never finished anything, I don't think. So, well, he had to. He finished some stuff, but like, yeah. It's just, yeah, I guess it's a mad genius, but I think it's just you're not using your brain when you really actually have to deliver. Like, do that, but do that as like a personal project. Don't like put that on a series that you have to finish. Yeah, so that job was my first job. So we're talking about women, right? Being a woman. Yeah, I grew up at a time. So I started in 2003. And it was a boys club for most of my jobs I go into, and it would be like me and maybe one other woman or two other women. And then there were women, but they were doing like the administrative jobs. But I found something happened around 2010, maybe, where all of a sudden, maybe it was late. No, it was later than that, like 13, 14 at Warner Brothers, where it was a lot of shows I was working on that were like, the stuff they were making at the time was like Batman, Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry. And those type of shows I find just cultivate a group of older white men. It's just something about those themes and those shows. Those are the people that apply and get those jobs. That's just the way it is. Not as much now, but then I noticed when like Unikitty came into production at Warner Brothers, and then a couple newer spin-offs that were different, sort of like a fresh new style on things. This younger crowd started coming in, and that's when I started to see a lot more like people of color and women, and all of a sudden it was like a little bit of a different vibe at WB, which was really cool. It just felt like it was like a new generation coming in. And now like, and then from going there to like, so when I left Warner Brothers, there was a lot of females, especially on the show, Benicula, we had a lot of female, talent on our show. It's funny though, cause at that time, like it was easier to find female designers, female painters, not as easy to find female board artists, but we had, I believe 2 on our show.
Board artists?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I don't really know the answer to that, but it's changing now. I feel like there might have been that idea that like, don't get into that because maybe if you have a family, you won't have time for it, because there was also this era and this sort of, mentality of like, you have to work all the time. If you're a director, you always have to be working. And it was this like weird workaholic vibe that was in animation studios. And sometimes you do have to put in those extra hours, but I knew guys that were like staying overnight and working, and I never did that. So I was always like, am I like missing something here?
Right. I always go back to this old video that I saw. It was a documentary on South Park where people are like sleeping under desks. Because they were constantly having to be as current as possible with current events and stuff like that. So Trey and Matt were always changing the script, so they'd have to be like at their computers, like ready to change things up on a constant basis. Now, clearly that's not always, there's something very specific about that because of the current event theme of the show.
It's a different beast.
But certainly you hear it, and I don't know what it's like now, but over the years, I've definitely heard the intensity in which there can be to meet deadlines and stay within budget. And that might require you to stay, basically working 80 hours a week. And that might be more like feature film type stuff. But what is it like in contrast for TV shows like yours?
At Nickelodeon, and when I worked at Warner Brothers, I didn't work crazy hours. I just got stuff done and I did it and went home. I worked extra hours at crunch times, but not all the time. But I think it is a lot to do with budgeting. And I think at, Warner Brothers at the time, the shows didn't have as big of budgets. So there was a lot of overtime, to get it done quicker. But currently, and I think overall, I think when you have women in higher roles, and I think people now are staying longer in animation. And what I mean by that is that there was a time where I was like, there's no one ever over the age of 40. What am I missing here? Because I think a lot of people who were getting older were like maybe just starting families, or, they were realizing there's more to life than work or whatever have you. And they were like, you know what, animation's not going to work for me because I can't be working all the time. So I think that when you have a more balanced crew, women and men, I think it just you have to make it so people can have time for their families. And I think that just
it's a great point.
Yeah. Like if a woman's running a show, she's not going to budget it so that everyone's there all the time because she has a family to go home to. And the way things were, you know, it's less about women and men's roles. They're not so defined now, but I think in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, even then it was even more like, you know, men were more able to be away from their kids, whereas women didn't feel as comfortable.
It was more normal.
It was more normalized. And I think now it's like, you know, we're really changing as a society. And I feel like people are finally putting more value in, like, you know, out, not just working all the time. Like, yeah,
work-life balance.
Yeah, let's create a lot of amazing things. We don't have to be here 24/7. I think the pandemic's really showing people that too, which is great. But yeah, I remember getting asked a question once that I thought was really interesting. An older man, I remember just he had a lot of white hair. He was like, I was pretty young, so I was like probably about 24, and he's like, as a woman, what is it like designing the Looney Tunes?
Right.
I was like, I remember just like, I didn't even know how to answer that, but I remember thinking, like, honestly, I've never thought about it while I was drawing.
Yeah.
Like, I never was like, oh, yes, I'm a woman drawing.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting, too, because, you know, my family's from Puerto Rico, and I've never thought about the fact that there really aren't that many Latin people in animation. At least when I was growing up, I just didn't really think about it. All I thought about was how cool they were. That's it. That's all I thought about, you know?
That's same here. Like, I used to watch these documentaries. It was all older guys flipping, like, maybe, well, they were old to me at the time, but they were like in their 20s in these Disney documentaries, flipping papers. And I didn't even look at the person doing it. It was more like, okay, it's a human. I can see that. Okay, what are they doing that I like? Like, I never thought, like, oh, because I'm female, that won't be my my path. But I think for a lot of people, they do need to see themselves represented.
Totally.
I just never thought about it. I don't know why. That could be something I could dive very deep into.
I mean, I definitely feel that for sure. You know, when you're working on a particular episode, what do you look for in a story, and what happens if you find like all kinds of damage control that needs to happen? You're like, this story is not working. How do you work within the confines of deadlines and wrangling the story to a place that is entertaining and is a success, essentially?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of it's funny. I haven't had to deal with anything like that for a while because I have such a well-run show and everyone's good at what they're doing. But let's say, like, if problems start, you just gotta watch it. So I think a good thing to do is, because I'm very reactive, so I'll watch something and I get very emotionally charged if it's not what I want. So I have to watch it all, think about it, sit back. And I don't make any decisions in my first watch of an animatic. But this is what I love about being at home, because before I used to have to sit beside people that made it and try to, like, figure out how I'm going to word it. And
I was just about to ask you that.
Now I don't have to do that. Now I can watch it and go, okay, that's not working. That's not working. That's not working. And I'm very, like, I'm almost like a people pleaser, and I don't want to make other people feel uncomfortable. So I, like, it's like, I have less mind space now devoted to that, and I'm so grateful for that. But, like, so now I can just watch it, and then, okay, I'll figure out, okay, I always have to go back, like, whose story is this? If it's real, this is like, we're talking a big mess, like, we're talking like nothing's working in this story. I think the best way to go back is like, okay, what are we trying to say in this story? Who is it about? And where are the main beats happening, you know? Mm-hmm. And then just sort of try to decode it from there and go through it. Because I think I always think of it as, like, the episode's like a sculpture, and you kind of have to, like, get off the big chunks.
Chip away.
Yeah, and then you keep refining it till the end. Like, my favorite part of directing is just adding, like, the great little, like, gestures and, like, you know, the little timing things that really make it sing. But chopping it at the very beginning is kind of the hardest part. Is just getting rid of, like, the big problems that aren't working. Sometimes things are so, like, you know, just not what you're expecting that you almost don't even know where to start. I've had moments where I just don't even know where to begin, you know, and then you just really gotta, like, scene by scene, figure it out. But I think if you know the structure of the show you're on and then you know the vision and the theme of the episode and whose story it is. Those are great. I think even just if you have a post-it of that on your desk to always come back to and remember what is the goal.
The fundamentals.
Yeah. And I think if you do that and then you don't rush it and you slowly go through different steps and then you get down to the whittling, I think it's the best way to go about it. That's how I kind of handle it.
How long does it usually take to finish an episode, start to finish?
They have 3 weeks to rough it, and then they pitch a rough, and then we give notes on that, and they have a week, I think, to add those notes. And then, no, they have 2 weeks to clean it up. And then, no, it must be longer than that, maybe 3 to 4. And then they present the clean board, and then we make more notes on that. And then we actually meet with the executives as well, and they come in and they make a few notes on it from there. And that's sort of nice. I like that stage because then I get like other opinions on it, because it's just been me at that point and the board artist like really digging into it. Then the executives will make a few notes. Then they'll go back and do the board artist will go back and do those notes. And then we go to animatic, or then I go into a record, get the audio. Then it goes into animatic build. Then we get our first cut.
Can you explain to the audience what animatics is? It's basically storyboarding, right? Like the in motion.
Yeah, it's basically they're taking all the panels and then the audio we get from the record, and they're putting that all together to make like a rough cut. So we get to see the characters moving to the audio, not fully moving, just the main key storyboard poses. And that's when you really get to see, like, that's where I see all the problems instantly. Sometimes, like, the board, you'll see the issues. You'll see, like, okay, that cut's not going to work. That's a jump cut, things like that. But then once you really see it playing out with the audio, it's just like the notes appear by the dozens, like we got to fix that. And that's great. I love the first cut. I love getting the first animatic cut. That's like the juiciest part, I think, is just getting it and like seeing it all together. That's probably the most exciting time. And then by the end of it, I have usually 10 to 12 different versions of animatic.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's a lot. Wow.
Yeah. And that's over like 3 to 4 weeks, just revising it. And sometimes like one version might not have that many changes, but some have bigger changes than others. I mean, maybe that's a lot. Maybe it's more like 7 to 12, depending on the show and what we needed to do and what we needed to rework. Yeah. Do you get stuck? When you get stuck, do you look at other inspiring directors? Do you ever go back to old classic directors? Do you look at Steven Spielberg, Quentin Tarantino? Do you get inspired by them in terms of how to frame a scene or anything like that? Yeah, I definitely think of cinema a lot. I don't watch a lot of animated things. But I mean, I love those two directors you mentioned. A lot of the time, I think subconsciously, I'm taking from movies I've seen, because I'll just be like, oh, I think this would be a great shot of this face. And then when I really think about it, I'm like, wow, that's like right out of E.T. or something. But I've never said to myself, I'm going to go watch a movie to get inspired. I normally just step away and I come back and then the ideas are there.
Right.
But I do watch a lot of movies. I make note of things that I really like. But for me, a lot of the cuts or the shots I choose are very, like, I just sort of base it on a gut emotional instinct of like, well, this is emotional. We're going to go closer. We're going to hold here because she just said something very revealing and we need to stay on that face and, make her eyes look to the side because she's uncomfortable. A lot of it is just like psychology, really, just sort of figuring out the shots that way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now that one of the episodes that I actually saw was Ghosted or Ghost.
Yeah, Ghosted. That was a 2-parter. Yeah.
Yeah. There's one scene in there that is that bar scene, the hotel scene. That
was not me. That was my board artist, Stu Livingston. He's
super.
Am
I wrong?
That's from
Stephen King.
Yeah, what's it called?
Jack Nicholson.
The Shining.
The Shining bar scene. Okay.
Yeah, he totally brought that in himself, and I loved it. I remember seeing that first board, and I burst out laughing because it was like the perfect. It was the perfect callback because it was like a perfect inspiration because it was a ghost episode and she's sort of losing her mind at the bar, but we couldn't have alcohol obviously because it's a children's show, so she's just drinking some water, just losing her mind a bit, like what's happening. Yeah, that was fun.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, I know what that's from.
Yeah, that being said, when we do stuff like that, we have to be very careful that we're not making it too much like that, because we can get in trouble for that. Yeah, sure. So, I'm curious. I always love to ask people in the animation field where they see traditional hand-drawn animation these days. So I wanted to get your take on that. Obviously, television and streaming apps, are heavy into hand-drawn animation, right? It's still very much a core part of how that's put together. Yeah, you see it a lot.
Do you have any thoughts on how you feel about feature animation? Because, I mean, obviously you've seen, you got basically Cartoon Brew, is it?
Yeah.
Cartoon...
That's a website.
Cartoon Saloon.
Okay.
The Irish company, Secret of Kells, and anyway, so they do all this great hand-drawn animation, but it doesn't get it's very hard to penetrate financially here in the United States. It's highly respected within the industry, highly respected in Ireland. Then you've got like films like Clouds, which are kind of an experimentation where, Netflix is just, stacks of money. They're like, put it into this movie and put it into that movie. But you still haven't seen the breakout films where you're like, oh my God, this is sort of the Little Mermaid game changer, where this can affect an entire industry, where hand-drawn animation can be, people who finance it can confidently say, yes, I'll do that as well. Let's get this going. Where do you see that these days? And is it possible that could happen again?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation, because I notice personally what I find very appealing lately is that a lot of movies, and the one I'm thinking of right now is the new SpongeBob one. It's 3D, but like there's sort of like people are figuring out ways to sort of do styles of 3D, so it's not that classic Pixar, streamlined 3D character and the camera's moving all around them, but sort of like a more traditional way of going about 3D. And they'll even like take out frames so it feels a little bit more handmade. Rough. Almost.
Right. Yeah, handcrafted. Right.
And I love that. I really liked the Peanuts movie.
Like the Lego movie.
Yeah, like
had that sort of feel.
I love that. I'm kind of tired of that like perfect polished 3D character. I can't attach to it as much, I find personally.
Yeah.
I mean, I watched like the new Disney movie, the dragon one. Raya. And like it was really beautiful and cool, but I was just, I don't know, it felt a little I think I'm just tired of all the 3D. Personally, I just think I think we're ready for something new. I think that's what it is. And I really liked like the Peanuts movie too, because they took Charlie Brown and the gang, they made them 3D, but they did it, in my opinion, very respectful. Very respectful. Yeah, and I watched it and I'm like, I love this. It's new, but it's still honoring the style, and it's just so well done.
Did you have any thoughts on Clouds, by the way? Did you like Clouds?
I don't know who that is, Clouds.
Klaus?
Klaus.
Like, yeah, Klaus, yeah.
Yes, I like that. I thought you said Clouds. No, Klaus is really cool. I watched that, I think, 2 Christmases ago. Yeah, it would have been 2, with my family. And, like, I think it was actually me and my grown siblings that liked it more than the kids. So maybe it's a kid thing. Like, maybe the kids right now are only really responding to that style. That could be a thing. But that being said, I have a 5-year-old and he loves this cartoon Zig and Sharko. It's a 2D sort of cat and mouse style show that he just loves. I don't know.
It's crazy because you think about the kids these days, they also are, sucked into hand-drawn animation on TV. So how come it doesn't it's like, it's weird. I don't understand how it doesn't translate to, it's like it's got to hit all the notes, it's got to be great enough for the parents to be like rah-rahing about it. It's got to be great enough for the kids to stay entertained the entire time. The story's got to be fantastic. it seems like it's got a lot of checkpoints in order for it to be sort of like a phenomenon. You know?
It needs to have a really, really good story, a way better story than a 3D movie would have to actually be successful. Yeah, I know what you're
100%.
saying. But I don't know that, like, I'm not like into the numbers of like these movies and what they're bringing in, so I don't really know. I don't pay attention to it, but I guess, overall, I guess they see bigger profits off of 3D. I think also it's harder to find these 2D artists now that can actually do that. I think it's a rarer talent now than ever.
So true. So true. Yeah. So last question is really almost somewhat tied to that. I know that we were talking about that new project you're working on, Spark. Is that right?
Yeah, it's Spark. They also have like the Nickelodeon Shorts program. So I think like every couple of years, they encourage every artist in the studio to come and pitch a concept.
Ooh.
And they encourage, and it's outside of the studio too. And that's what I applied for. I applied for the shorts program, and they said, we don't want to make a short out of your idea, but we'd want to develop it. And I was like, that's cool too. I'll take it.
Yeah, I'll take that.
But they were like, I remember Daniel Weinman, he's in development. He was like so upset to tell me the news. Like, I'm so sorry, we don't want to do a short. I was like, okay.
Oh my God.
But is it okay? Like, would you be interested in developing? I'm like, I would prefer that actually. So it was really funny.
No, that's a terrible idea. Yeah, it's horrible.
It was funny how that happened. But yeah, that's really cool. Like Nickelodeon is like one of the only studios that does that I've seen. Where they and that's really cool for creators. And the shorts that they made.
So you still actively work on trying to maybe pitch certain things like that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I actually have two shows in development right now, which is awesome but horrible. Because I have the one at Nickelodeon, which is great, and at the same time this year, it's like when the year changed to 2021, the next day it was like, okay, 2 shows that I was pitching for years all of a sudden are going to start same day almost development.
What?
So you can't be sad about it, but you can also be like, really? Oh, 2 at the same time? Like, we could have at least 6 months at least in between the development starts of these shows, but no.
So you're saying outside of Spark, there's another one?
Yeah, I have a show I'm developing with Wild Brain Canada with a friend in Canada. Yeah.
Ooh, nice. So, what's that one called?
I can't tell you yet. Actually, funny thing is, we change the title probably every couple days, so there is no title. But it's just it's characters I've been pitching forever, like since I was in my early 20s. So that's one thing I can say. It's like
what I personally would like is a sequel to I Like Pandas. I'm just going to tell you that right now.
Yeah, I would love to do something with those guys. Well, the cool thing about that is there are a couple characters from those films that will be in one of them. So
okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
But I tried to pitch I Like Pandas. I tried to figure out a way to do it. I think I just need to find the right people to work with to do that one. Because I just feel like on my own, I can't figure out exactly what I want to do with it. But I would.
I have a feeling you've got some people around you that could help out with that.
Yeah, I think if I asked the right people around me, they would.
Nice. All right. Well, listen. We're just about up out of time here, and I really love talking with you. It's so cool for you to take the time to speak with us. Can you tell everybody where they can find you online?
Yes. I post mostly on Instagram. So it's Jessica Borustki at Instagram. That's how it works, right? Or is it at Instagram.com/Jessica Borustki? However that works. But it's just my name. Right, yeah. If you go to Instagram and type in my name, it shows up.
Yeah. And that's Borutski.
Yeah. So that's where I post all my stuff. That's really it. I mean, everything I post on Instagram, it goes right to Facebook. So.
Right.
That's normally where I post my art.
By the way, is your husband Eric Bauza? Is that right?
Yeah, no, we're not married though. Yeah, we were never married.
Gotcha.
The internet lies.
Well, tell him I love his work on the new Looney Tunes cartoons.
Yeah, he is a voice actor on almost everything.
Yeah, super talented. Love his work.
Yeah.
Jessica, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure, and all the best of luck on the new projects, and I can't wait to see how that all comes together, okay?
Thank you so much. It was really fun to talk with you. Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to the Pencil Pushers Podcast. Follow us on Instagram at the Pencil Pushers Podcast for visual representation of our guest artwork, topics discussed, and anything else that contributes to the show. So be sure to subscribe. Tell a friend. Tell lots and lots of friends. Become a Leadhead. And we're out.